Welcome to Brightly Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we use our good and bad experiences, friendship, and passions to inspire thought provoking conversation and soul driven advice to better help you create a life worth living and step more brightly into yourself inch by inch.
Gracie,
Amy,
hello.
you just completed another rotation around the sun, my friend. How do you feel?
I did. I This is I'm almost going to say weird, but it's not that weird, I guess. Exceptionally well. That is how I feel. I woke up the morning of my birthday so excited to start this next year, you
We
know.
love a beginning here, don't we?
We do. We do. But also, it was more than just like it felt deeper than what other years have felt recently. And I'm not sure what that is. Now, I do know, we also love a good number, right? So I turned it a pretty big number. I turned 65. 6 plus 5 equals 11. And
Ooh, look
so,
at you doing your
yeah,
numerology.
yeah. So I'm like 11. Yes, yes, please, more.
I wonder if we were to actually get into numerology, what 2024 is for you next year. So
Mhm.
have you done that? You look like you're
No, but I'm going to do it. I every day I'm like, oh, you got to do that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I do. And you'd think that I'd know what it was going to be since I knew what this last year was. But now all of a sudden I'm struggling. I'm like, is it a 7 or an 8? I think it might be an 8.
I'm wondering if it's a 9 because you're like glowing with this anticipation of like
Yeah,
a cycle either coming to the end or starting. And just based on what you described, I feel more like it's a culmination and like this reward and like this coming together of all your efforts.
nice,
So maybe
nice.
it is an 8. I mean, 8, I mean, there are no bad numbers, bad
Right.
years. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it kind of. So we do reflections all the time, right? We like beginnings, we like endings, we like cycles and things like that. So with you, like I treat my birthday like a personal new year. Do you do anything like that yourself?
Well, I did. I took the day and really thought about how I want this next year to go and how I want to live it and how I want to live in it and show up for it. I actually have more to do with that, but and this birthday also the day of the birthday, um, you know, we did a couple other things too. So, uh, but I did get a planner. I went out and bought a planner. So that's always exciting. I thought about you though and how you treat it as like a new year, and I know that you go off and do special things, and I had was thinking about that and I didn't do it, but I realized it's okay. You can do it at another time. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be on that day. You can still be considering this next year.
Sorry, Amy, the 25th of every month is yours to mark your anniversary of your birth.
Thank you. More, please.
I so a thing we used to talk about, I don't think it's come up at all this year in the show, but what used to be crucial to understanding who Tracy was that every Thursday I woke up and was like, oh my God, it's Thursday. What are you doing with your life? Right. And this
Well, it
week,
actually has come up because it came up for October for me.
oh, that's right.
Remember?
So
The
it's still
Thursday of the
there.
year. Yeah.
Well, I had this past week, I had it's Wednesday. What am I doing with my life? And so I loved how
Oh,
you kind of marked your birthday by thinking about how you want to live in it. Is that like I just want like a solo up of you talking about your birthday and all this because that was all so beautiful. Everything you said, live in it, live for it, right? Like all this stuff. But so I just had this moment of like, instead of panic with the end of the year coming, right? Like we're in the last few weeks and things like that, and New Year's, no matter if you think it's fake or what, or you will, and all this stuff, whether or not you make resolutions and all that. Like, it just felt like so much opportunity versus threat.
Yeah.
And so
Agreed. And you know what I love is that it was one day different for you. It was a Wednesday, and it was like, oh, what it's Wednesday. What am I doing?
I
Not,
actually had
oh
a
my God,
moment.
it's Thursday. What am I doing?
I had a moment where I was like, is Thursday Tracy in a panic because Wednesday Tracy's too daydreamy? Creates these really big lavish goals and ideals and sets this grand stage and then goes to sleep, and Thursday Tracy has to do what she promised last week yet and all this new stuff. No. But with that, so between your birthday, the end of the year, and just like these, I also have a similar feeling right now of like, ooh, what's next? Like, it feels more exciting than it usually has. So I think the numerology for both of us, or even just like the world of 2024, has to be really interesting. I guess it will be an 8 year in general next year.
Yeah.
Um, and so before we talked about or had these feelings, we kind of planned our annual kind of reflection, planning, preparing kind of series of episodes. And in looking back from our during our break last week, to be like, oh, what are some episodes I can share with people for them to either listen again or listen for the first time as we gear up? And I realized I don't know us at all, and that we're some frauds and tricksters here. A bunch of Wednesday night thinkers that just have all these bold statements with no action behind them. And I let you know what I learned about us, and your response, I was so happy it matched the vibes. Because it was, what? How the hell can that be? So, Amy, do you want to share with the class what we learned about ourselves this week?
Yeah, we've never done an episode on values.
And for those of you that are new, us not having a standalone episode about values is very striking, because every week we used to create a special Canva artistic social media post and quote around the 11 brightly values and the values we hold dear to us here
Yeah.
and try to aspire to be. And I will say, when I searched our planning document, the word values comes up like 28 times. And we've done an episode on character before, and we've done all this stuff, but man, did I assume some things about us? I'm keeping the title what I originally had it, because it can still work, and I'm stubborn, but I originally titled this Revisiting Values.
Well, it does work because we're revisiting our own values.
Exactly. Thank you. You boarded that train. I was chugging along there, because it's just so funny, because we think about our own values all the time, and we talk about them on the show, and so
We created together show values. I mean, we
yeah.
had our own values, and then we thought of what we wanted the values to be for the show and never did an episode.
And so I I think so. Why this is important to me is, if you're somebody who's drawn to a show like Brightly and our opening statement and all that, I want to make sure that you are firmly planted and self-aware of your own values, as you look forward to potentially setting your goals for the next year, or even reflecting on your current one. Because values, I feel like, are kind of key to making decisions, or at least having value driven decisions, and knowing yourself and what you're calling in. um
I think that for the longest time in my own life, I just assumed it was like, yes, of course I have values. Of course I live by my values. Had I ever actually verbalized what those values were, or thought about them, or reflected, or even wrote them down? No.
And
No, I did not.
so,
But also, and then I was just going to say, when big important things come up in your life, if you can say to yourself, how does this relate to my values? And will this enhance this, maybe my number one value of whatever it might be? Maybe it's family or love or kindness, whatever. Like, does this relate to my value? It's such a great way to make decisions and think about next steps for your lives. I'm sorry. So go ahead.
well, so you actually brought up some really great examples of what was going to be my next point. There isn't a bad value, right? There aren't many people out there who I would say are intentionally going out there with goals of bad values in their life, like a movie villain, right? And so it's important to know your values and what's most important to you, but then to also actually define them. Um, because as you get into relationships with other people, as you look for places to work and things like that, I think a lot of times where miscommunication comes in or misunderstandings is people thinking they value the same thing, but really they define it differently. So
Yes.
I
You and I
had
have had good conversations around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just always go back to I had a friend in her mid-20s who married and divorced the same gentleman twice. And it was her high school sweetheart as well. So someone that they'd known their whole lives, right? But were in at least some sort of relationship with for 10 to 12 years. And the during the second divorce, which took thankfully, she was really confused, and like that was the source of a lot of her sadness around this. Was he said he wanted a family, we both valued family, they defined family very differently. He
Mm.
saw family as having a wife and having a child and providing for them, and that those are the people you can have the highest standards of and be the most honest to about their faults and the criticisms, and in an effort in his little mind to elevate everybody, right? He was a bit of a perfectionist, but to him, acquiring that wife, getting her pregnant, and then providing for the family and providing a home was family to him. And then he got to go and do whatever he wanted. To her, family was quality time. Family was tradition. Family was the safe space where you're the nicest to each other and where it's okay to have faults. And so here, every time they talked about their relationship, they were both like, yes, I value family. I value love. I value blah, blah, blah. And here, if they would have sat down and actually defined them, they would have saw that they wanted much, much different things in life. And so I feel like if you know what you value and how you define it, you're going to be able to spot that in other people, places, and things a lot faster or easier, seamlessly. You're squinting and nodding for those that aren't watching on the video.
No, I agree. And I think that it's so important that you did stress that you have to define it for yourself, because it's one thing to throw a word out, and it's another thing to actually attach a definition to it, because we all have our own connotations of what words mean, right? And because of our backgrounds, how we were brought up, who our parents were, who our friends were, those words mean different things
Mm-hmm.
to different people. And so I mean, it's a sad story, but it's a great story that really hits home, that here's two individuals who value family, and it's pretty much opposites.
And it caused a lot of pain and hurt along the
Yeah.
way. And a lot of blame in either direction as well. And so just think about, had they both known themselves better, or in a different way, so that when they communicated they weren't just throwing out the buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, there's not a bad value out there. So it's going to be really easy to find someone who has the same top 10 as you, right? So it's kind of like those the strengths that we talk about all the
Mm-hmm.
time on here, that there's they're not bad if you do, right? Like you might.
They're not bad, but the same thing with the strengths is that this person's maybe number three strength, which is, let's say it's, I, I don't know, positivity shows up this way. And this person who also has a top five strength of positivity shows up this other way because of the other strengths around it. Those other strengths inform that strength. So while you both still might have that strength and you can see it in each other, it's thrown out to the world in a different way, and you approach it in a different way.
And that was another huge learning moment for me. You were my strengths coach. It's one of the ways we bonded. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember like going through this with you, and it's like, well, yeah, but everybody does that. And you're like, no, Tracy, these are different. Like this is not like just like a printout. This is not just like an automated thing. Like that's why we have coaches. Everybody gets different things, even like you said, with the same strength. Um, I think also with the values, because you and I, we've both done it for the show, we've done it for ourselves. And why I wanted to call this revisiting is I haven't done an exercise for myself since probably 2012, where I've been really intentional with sitting down. And every time we talk about values and I bring out my bullet journal from that time period, I'm like, ugh, weren't these aspirational? And and so I think for me, like there's the values that are just inherent to me, like honesty, loyalty, trustworthiness. I'm never gonna put those in my top 10 because that's like a base level default.
Yes, thank you for actually stating that, because there were some, as I was revisiting my values, I was like, oh, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And I'm like, that's implied by
Yes,
being a good human being.
that is an expectation, right?
Yes.
And so when I was kind of like, okay, well, in revisiting values, why don't my old ones fit anymore? And how do I want to make this new list look? I
Oh,
I I kind of picture kind of two different lists. One of this is how it already is. This is who I am. Like this is a snapshot of Tracy. These 10 are nobody would be surprised if I was like, yes, these are kind of my top 10 values, right?
mhm.
But then I also have like I said, like these aspirational ones. So aspire wisely, not like 10 year ago, Tracy. But like as I look forward to the life I want, kind of like what you're describing with your birthday, like what would I consider to be meaningful and essential to having a fulfilled and purposeful life? Going back to our other
Yeah.
episodes, like what's missing? What values, kind of like with strengths, you have like balconies and basements, right? What values have I maybe always thought were important, but I haven't invested effort into elevating? And really living those values in my life or seeking out those opportunities or making decisions based on that's the person I
Yeah.
want to be. Um,
Yeah. I feel like that will tie in very nicely to a future episode for Word of the Year, that you could almost use that aspirational value if you wanted to for a Word of the Year. But I hadn't I hadn't consciously thought of that, but I know my values, my current values, for sure one, potentially two, and maybe more, are more aspirational. And so it must have somewhere in my head I was like, but this is what I want to work towards,
yeah.
right?
And I
Yeah.
mean, then maybe that's just a value in and of itself is, some sort of personal growth or aspiration, right? Like some sort of character
Absolutely.
driven. Like maybe there is
Yeah.
probably a way if you want a shorter list or only one list, you could probably sum it up in a word, right?
Mhm.
But as you mentioned, like we like words of the year, we like goals, we like effort, like we like words here. So I'm down for multiple lists. Okay, so you have a current list of values.
Mhm.
Don't be shy, drop the list.
Oh, oh,
Would you be open to
I'm just like, yes, I do. And
it?
yeah, no, I'm completely open to it. So, number one, which is interesting to me because it wasn't on my past list, is connection. And what I love too is that I actually defined them after I wrote the word. I defined it for myself, or was it on my past list? I don't think it was. I don't
I don't
know.
have
No,
your
I can't
past list. I
remember.
was just like, connection was on my past list. I was just
Yeah,
confirming
I
before
see.
interrupting.
Yes. But so, yeah, so connection for me is to the people closest to me. This feels more prioritized than it did in the past. I want to nurture present connections and cultivate new ones. Connection also means connection to nature, cycles, spirit guides, and my higher self. So I use connection as kind of like
The
it's
Trinity.
it kind of, and I think that what we were just talking about, like, could you ball it up into one word? It almost feels like this might be it for me. But so connection, creativity, and I wrote, I start to feel shriveled on the inside when I don't use my creativity in a tangible way. So, in other words, actually creating something. Um, Kindness. If I can lead with kindness, it makes everything better. And I also look at kindness as being encompassing um, compassion, empathy, uh, just a lot of different values rolled up into kindness. Curiosity, a beginner's brain. I wrote curiosity and a beginner's brain to learn about people and things, even myself. Autonomy, and then I wrote sovereignty.
Ooh, look at you, an independent nation over there.
Yeah. And then I wrote being the boss of me. And then the final one, because this is as long as my list was, and this is the one that surprised me, is simplicity. And I wrote more and more, I value the ease simplicity brings. Fewer choices equals less frustration. So perhaps simplicity as ease. And then it sort of made me think about grace and ease. But I am I am really doing a lot now. Don't look behind me if you're watching on YouTube. And actually, you could look behind me because this is a much simpler view than what it used to be. But slowly but surely, I'm just going through things and editing things. So, some things that didn't make it, and I feel like they're implied. Joy isn't on there anymore. Enthusiasm isn't on there. Authenticity, um, intention. But I feel that those are just kind of how I live my life to begin with. So, yeah. What about you? What's new
Oh,
for
wait, wait.
you?
So
Oh,
when did you, so this is your new list?
my new list.
So I
Was
have
I supposed to give you my old list first?
you can do whatever you want. You're a co-host and producer, madam.
And I am sovereign.
Okay, so are you okay with me kind of like putting a spotlight on some of these with some questions for you?
Yeah, of course I am.
So if we're viewing our values as kind of like a guiding light in our lives, right? What's going to be different if you were to truly be sovereign and to be your own boss? Like, are you ready to make those changes yet, or is it still a future goal?
I think that, so when I said there are a couple that are aspirational,
Aspirational?
yes, that and simplicity are two aspirational
Okay.
ones. Yes. But I think it would behoove me to write a paragraph or two as to what that would look like and how I would live my life that way.
Well, and the only reason though those ones stood out to me is, your future freedom, right? Like I keep going back to like that one day you took off of work and had the most perfect day and how you want every day to be like that, right? But especially with your most recent birthday, you're much closer to retirement, right? So I can see why that's also like a firm value. So I would wonder too, like that's probably once that happens, once you do retire, become your own boss and whatnot, that sovereignty value is going to be more of a reminder, right? Before you say yes to a responsibility or a
Yes.
role, right? And
Yeah.
Like right now, it's really easy to be like, oh, this is just something I want because right now I have a day job and I'm a slave to the man. And
But I think it also is a reminder too that if I'm like, oh, I don't feel like writing, this could be a reminder. But if this is what you want for future you, then perhaps this is what you need should be doing today as a gift for future
oh,
you.
and if I had like sovereignty and be my own boss on my values and I didn't feel like writing, I'd be like, you are your boss. You do not have to write. What do you
Yeah,
want to do today?
eventually I will be, but for right now, I have to work towards that
Okay.
ability to be able to go, you're good and you don't have to do that today.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing. I
You're
think
welcome.
that does like paint a picture of not only who you are, but where you want to be.
Yeah.
And I love that connection is on there because you've done a great job, both for what we have in mind for next season on the show, reaching out to people, but then also this year, like you've done some really cool things. Like you went to dinner with a bunch of strangers, right? And like
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
got invited to a dinner through a friend of a friend, with a bunch of people you didn't know, right? And like, we both are feeling really drawn to building more friendships and connections and relationships and things like that. And so that
Yeah.
being a value makes so much sense because it's also, I can see it in your actions already.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Thank you. All
So
right, let's hear yours.
So mine, I think I've gone through some of these in the past. That's why I was so surprised that we've never done an episode because I know I've taken this bullet journal out before. But so mine before, I had a list of 10, and then I also gave like a little statement for each of them. So I won't say the statement, but it was grace, connection, balance, daring,
Ooh,
preparedness, right? Impactful, mindfulness, learning, resolve, and generosity.
nice.
You can tell I had a thesaurus and I was probably a little bored with my life and I wanted something bigger. I wanted
What
something
I
more.
like, what I like is sort of the duality of daring next to preparedness. And yet I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So well, and then daring was so the statement for that was live an audaciously bold and adventurous life.
Nice.
And at the time, I was in the throes of overcoming being laid off from a job and moving back to my parents and not knowing what to do with my life and nannying for my sister and taking temp jobs, right? Like nothing about my life was anything I had ever wanted it to be. And I no longer knew what I wanted, right? And so, like, that's where defining my values became really important because I was like, I got to that point where instead of feeling sorry for myself or apathetic or depressed, I was like, okay, what do we want to do now? And who are we now? Right. And so that's where this exercise originally came from. And then for preparedness, it was more the secret to success is to be ready when your opportunity comes.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And so I was so focused in that I was laid off, they don't want me. Applying for jobs and not even getting a call for an interview, right? Like I wasn't even getting to a rejection from an interview standpoint. I just wasn't even being contacted. So you start to doubt, like, do I even have any skills? Do I bring any worth to, the environment? And so like that's where those two came in is like, yes, I want to make big choices and not beholden myself to who I was in the past or what a different company thought of my value. But I also want to start building skills and the things I'm interested in so that when that job comes, right? Like what's that? I think I keep attributing this quote to Will Smith, but like if you always stay ready, you don't ever have to get ready, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of that mindset. Now, like who I am now, and I'm almost 40, so like that was in my late 20s. I don't think I was even 30 yet, still kind of figuring it out. Um, Now I have like the benefit of the decisions I did and didn't make based on these values. And like I
Yeah.
said, how many felt aspirational and like some of them,
Mhm.
I don't think they quite encapsulated what I really meant, even with those statements or the life I really wanted. So like balance to me, um, was kind of like where your autonomous sovereign life was kind of coming from, right?
Hmm.
Like I, like I said, I was at someone else's home. I was
Yeah.
bouncing between jobs. I was let go from one. And so now I'm like, it's not that I want balance, just balance. I was like, you know what I want? I want peace, right? Like
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
make decisions right now on relationships, dating, jobs, opportunities, everything is about how much will this disrupt my inner and outer peace. Like, I think that's what I truly mean now by balance. And there is balance within that, but it's really about
Mhm.
my peace.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And then also independence is huge for me. Uh thoughtfulness. After this year, I think health and wellness and or rest.
Yeah.
As much as I want, like when I look at this, one of those words for me that I was like, gosh, I had bold, daring, adventurous life. Adventure comes up a lot for a lot of people in dating profiles. I love trying a new thing. I get new foods at restaurants every time I go. I love doing new events and stuff like that. But I really balance that with also staying home. And the adventures I do go on are heavily planned and thought out. And so adventure is not the right word for me because a
Yeah.
lot of people equate that also with spontaneity. And that's not something I value. I go in the opposite direction. I think empathy is a huge one on there. Um, Sincerity or genuineness. Um, One thing I was like, oh, is this truly like where the value exercise is, right? But like punctuality. I was like, you know what? If it's me as a person, I am so annoyed. Like if you say it, like it's okay to be 5 to 10 minutes late, whatever. But like, oh, if
I'm
it
pretty sure that was one of my mom's top 10 values.
okay, thank you. And then I'm also like, oh, is this one of those things where it's just a Tracy thing, or is that why it has to be on the top 10 value list? But like organization, I'm very organized and I like to organize and I like
Oh, no, I
categorizing,
can see that. I think that's
right?
wonderful. Yes. Yeah.
And then there's one thing I used to have on a dating profile that a friend of mine looked at and he's like, is that you only get so many characters? Is that really that important? Or you only get so many options in this area? And I said, you know what? It's the most important because it's important to other people and I'm tired of talking about it. And it's my
Oh,
vegetarianism and animal rights and things like that. I'm an ethical
yeah.
vegetarian. And if one more guy on a dating app puts me on an island or talks to me about protein, I'm going to lose my damn mind. It's not up for discussion or debate. Um, and so while no, I don't necessarily need other people to be. We're all conscious adults with information and things like that. It does say a lot about me that I need people to know in advance, right?
And you definitely, that is something that is high on your list for how you live your life, right? You make decisions
Yes.
at the grocery store, in the restaurant, all kinds of
Vacations,
decisions.
countries, like, right?
Exactly. So I can see that being on your values list.
Yeah. And then I really struggled. Like after I came up with these 10, I was like, should I be number one? Am I my highest
Oh, for
value?
heaven's sakes. I I have chills all over. I never thought of that, Tracy. I love that.
Is that one of those trick question things? But after that, this year has been about me to a selfish degree in some ways.
It's
But like with
not
the
selfish, but
but with
go
the
ahead.
self-advocacy episode,
Mhm,
and you mentioning, how you are able to advocate for others but struggle for yourself. And you're
mhm.
like, hey, how are you so, skilled at doing this? And I was like, it's innate. And I was like, you know what? I think I have me as my number one value already. Um, it's why peace is so important to me and why I have it is because I prioritize my values, I prioritize me,
I'm going to have to prioritize me if I want to prioritize autonomy or even connection or
right?
creativity.
And you have to
Wow.
define yourself so that you know who you are, so that you know what connections and people know who you are in those connections, right?
Wow.
And then intention came up, which you guys are going to hear that a lot in season 4.
Yeah.
And then I know we're kind of running short on time, but the main thing with like just jotting down a list, don't limit yourself to 10. Do free writing, do all sorts of exercises. There's a bunch out there on the internet you can Google. You
You
know how
can
to
Google
define.
values just in
Yeah.
case you have like a brain freeze. Like, what is
Oh,
value,
I
right?
asked Chat GPT to give me 100. And that's when
Yeah.
I was like looking at it, I was like, there are no bad values. I want all of these in my life. And so come up with your own list, look at other lists out there, talk to other people, and then prioritize. Because
Yeah.
there's going to be a point for me right now where I am in my career and my life where is my peace more important to me than my ambition in my career and my need and desire for more pay, right? Because if I do go for a new job opportunity, that is going to disrupt my peace. And I have to know which one is a higher priority and why and how long and how to rebalance that out, right? And so, and then like we just have said a whole bunch, there are no bad values. So you have to know what's more important to you. And I used AI to like, hey, tell me like the what values conflict with each other, right? So like one of them that came up was religion versus independence.
Oh,
Let's see,
interesting.
learning versus stability, joy versus stability, generosity versus thriftiness.
Yeah, you don't think about that. That's so interesting.
And so
So,
that's where the prioritization or is important. So, or just at least the defining so that when these things come up, right? Kind of like what I was
yeah.
talking about. Like I am all for adventure, but I'm not huge on spontaneity for some like I jumped out of a plane. I looked at 4 different places and researched for 5 months and talked to a bunch of people before I booked the trip, right? Like
Yeah.
whereas I see people go to foreign countries and bungee jump off a bridge and do a canyon with spiky rocks. And I'm like, nope, that's
Spiky,
not my kind of
spiky
adventure.
rocks. Spiky rocks are not on my values list.
I'm sure other countries and other people also value safety and security, but if I can't speak the language and if I can't understand what the security protocols are or check in on you, that's important to me. Other people are very trustworthy of the
Mhm.
systems and organizations.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so like this is it's all these things are important for being able to set and meet your goals, right? In a way that's congruent with your values as well. So with that, I do have the tarot cards. So I'll
Okay.
do a quick draw about
Yeah,
what's the question? What do people need to know about developing personal values?
sure.
You're so excited. Ooh. I decided to just go with the bottom card before I
Nice.
it's strength.
Oh, and of course, I want to immediately dive in, right? I want to just be going, blah, 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 blah. No, I love that. That'll be great. That'll be fun.
And
Yes.
that's if you're into tarot or oracle cards, that is something I did a couple year ago when I was trying to think about the values I'd like to call in a desired partner, like all those kinds of exercises out there. I went through my tarot card books and they all give like 3 or 4 words per card.
Yes.
A lot
Yes.
of them are values. And so I just went through
You're
and I
right.
picked those and I listed the ones out that I really liked and what I wanted to be, what I wanted someone else to be. It was a super fun exercise. And now it relates to the tarot as well. You could just look at a card and start there, right? Major arcana.
Yeah,
Like
you could. I love that. Wow. That was, this was such a great conversation. I feel like we could keep going on. But if this episode spoke to you or your soul, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day.